The nanny arrived at the mansion with hidden cameras and a badge beneath her scrubs. The Mafia boss installed surveillance to catch her in betrayal. What he saw instead changed everything. She was saving the children everyone else had given up on, including him. Nico Falcone didn't trust anyone anymore. Not after what happened at Giordano's restaurant 3 months ago. The gunfire, the screams, his children's bodies crumpling to the floor like discarded puppets. He sat in his office now, bourbon untouched on the mahogany desk, watching 6 security monitors with the intensity of a hawk. The cameras were new, hidden, state-of-the-art equipment that cost more than most people made in a year. Every angle of his mansion was covered, but especially the east wing where his twins slept, where the new nanny was working. Mr. Falcone? His head of security, Dante, knocked twice before entering. The background check came back clean. Rose Marlin, 32. Philadelphia-born and raised. Licensed pediatric nurse with specialized training in trauma care. 5 years at Children's Hospital, 2 years in private care. No criminal record.
No debts.
No suspicious connections. Too clean, Nico muttered, his dark eyes never leaving the screens. Sir? Nobody's that clean, Dante. Especially nobody willing to work in this house. Nico finally looked up. His face was harder than it used to be, lined with new scars, one across his left cheek, another disappearing into his collar. The assassination attempt had changed him, made him a ghost in his own empire. Keep watching her. Already am, boss. On the monitor, Rose Marlin moved through the twins' bedroom with quiet efficiency. She was plain-looking in the way that made people underestimate her. Brown hair pulled back, minimal makeup, scrubs that hid her figure. Nothing remarkable, nothing threatening. That's what worried him. Nico had hired 4 nannies in 3 months. The first quit after 2 days, crying that the house felt like a prison. The second was caught trying to take photos of his office. The third couldn't handle Marco's nightmares. The boy woke up screaming every night, reliving the moment the bullets found him. The fourth simply stopped showing up. But Rose had walked into his mansion yesterday morning like she owned the place.
Calm.
Professional. She'd looked at his twins, Marco and Lucia, both paralyzed from the waist down, both hollow-eyed and silent, and she'd smiled. Not a pitying smile. A real one.
Hello, Marco.
Hello, Lucia, she'd said, kneeling beside their wheelchairs. I'm Rose. I'm going to be spending a lot of time with you, so I need to know, what's your favorite color? And don't say the same thing just to agree with each other. I can tell you to do that. Lucia had blinked in surprise. Nobody had asked them a normal question in months. Everyone tiptoed around them, like they were made of glass. Purple, Lucia whispered. Green, Marco added, his voice stronger. Like the Hulk. Good choices. I like orange, which everyone says is weird, but I don't care. Rose had pulled out 2 small notebooks from her bag, one purple, one green. These are yours. Private journals. You can write or draw anything you want, and nobody gets to see them unless you say so. Not even me. Not even your dad. Deal? The twins had actually smiled. Nico had watched the entire exchange from the doorway, his hand instinctively resting on the gun beneath his jacket. Something about her was off. Too comfortable. Too perfect. Now, 12 hours later, he was watching her again. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. The twins should have been asleep hours ago, but Rose had asked permission to stay late for their first night, citing the importance of routine establishment. Nico had agreed, mostly because it gave him more footage to review. On screen, Rose moved Lucia's left leg with careful precision. She bent the knee, rotated the ankle, applied pressure to specific points along the calf. Her lips moved, whispering something Nico couldn't hear. He turned up the audio. Flexor hallucis longus, tibialis posterior. Now we activate the peroneal nerve. Rose's voice was clinical, medical. Too medical for a regular nurse. Feel that warmth, Lucia? That's your body remembering. It wants to work. We just have to remind it how. Nico leaned forward. The doctors had said nerve regeneration was unlikely. Possible, but unlikely. They'd used words like significant damage and permanent paralysis and quality of life adjustments. Rose pulled out a small device. It looked like a modified TENS unit, the kind used for muscle stimulation. She attached electrodes to Lucia's foot with practiced ease. "This might tingle," she warned. "Tell me if it hurts." "It tickles," Lucia giggled. Actually giggled. Nico couldn't remember the last time he'd heard his daughter laugh. Rose adjusted the settings.
Good.
"That means the nerves are responding. We're going to do this every night, okay? You and Marco both. It's going to take time, but I've seen kids bounce back from worse." "Will we walk again?" Lucia asked. The same question she'd asked Nico 100 times. The question he could never answer. "I don't make promises I can't keep," Rose said carefully. "But I believe in fighting for every inch." "And you're a fighter, Lucia. I can tell." She moved to Marco's bed, repeated the process. But with Marco, something different happened. As Rose manipulated his right foot, pressing down on the arch, Marco's toes curled. Just slightly. Just for a second. Rose froze. Marked something in her notebook. Glanced at the door, as if checking whether anyone saw. Nico rewound the footage. Watched it again. Marco's toes had definitely moved. Voluntary or reflex. The doctor said reflexes were possible, even with nerve damage. But Rose's reaction suggested she knew the difference. She knew something. Nico grabbed his phone, typed a message to Dante. Deeper background check. Medical records. Training certifications. Bank accounts. Phone records. Everything. "I want to know what she ate for breakfast 5 years ago." On screen, Rose tucked both children in, kissed their foreheads, and whispered something that made them both smile. Then she left the room, her expression changing the moment she stepped into the hallway. The warmth vanished. Her face went cold. Professional. She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, and deleted it immediately after sending. Nico's jaw tightened. "Who are you really, Rose Marlin?" he muttered to the empty office. His phone buzzed. A text from his Aunt Lucia Sr., the only family member he trusted completely. "The Corsini family is moving shipments through the harbor tomorrow night. They think you're too weak to respond. Are they right?" Nico stared at the message, then back at the monitors. 6 months ago, he would have responded with overwhelming force. Burned their operations to the ground. Sent a message written in blood. But 6 months ago, his children could walk. Now he had different priorities. Weaker ones, his rivals would say. But as he watched Rose's empty bedroom through the camera feed, as he thought about Marco's moving toes and Lucia's laughter, he realized something had shifted. He'd built an empire on violence and fear. And it had nearly cost him everything that mattered. Tomorrow he'd deal with the Corsinis. Tonight, he had a nanny to investigate. Because Nico Falcone hadn't survived 20 years in this business by ignoring his instincts. And every instinct he had was screaming that Rose Marlin was hiding something. He just didn't know yet whether she was his enemy or his salvation. The bourbon finally met his lips as he settled in for a long night of watching. The cameras never lied. But people always did. Rose sat in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner 3 miles from the Falcone mansion. Her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel. She'd held it together in front of the twins, maintained her cover in front of the security camera she'd spotted within her first hour. But now, alone in the darkness, the weight of what she was doing crashed down on her. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Loading dock. Behind Harry's auto shop. 20 minutes. She deleted the message, started her car, and drove. The loading dock was exactly what she expected, grimy, poorly lit, smelling like motor oil and old cigarettes. A white surveillance van sat in the shadows, its side panel reading Acme Plumbing Services in faded letters. Nobody would look twice at it. Rose knocked 3 times. The door slid open. Inside, Detective Marcus Webb sat surrounded by monitors and recording equipment. He was 50-ish, gray at the temples, with the perpetual exhaustion of a man who'd seen too much. Beside him sat Agent Sarah Chun from the FBI, younger and sharper, her laptop open to files marked confidential. "You're late," Webb said. "I'm here," Rose climbed in, pulled the door shut. "And I need to talk to you about." "The body cam footage first," Chen interrupted, holding out her hand. "Protocol." Rose reached into her bag, pulled out the small button camera disguised as part of her name badge. Chun plugged it into her laptop, and footage from inside the mansion began playing on the largest monitor. The twins' bedroom, the therapy session, Lucia's laugh. Webb watched in silence. When Marco's toes curled on screen, Chun paused the video. "Is that voluntary movement?" "I think so," Rose said quietly. "The doctors told Falcone it was impossible, but they were wrong. Those kids have been written off. Nobody's been working with them properly. Nobody's been." "Your job isn't physical therapy," Webb cut in. "Your job is intelligence gathering. We sent you into that house to get evidence on Nico Falcone's operations. Weapons trafficking, money laundering, the names of his suppliers. Instead, I'm watching you play nurse." "I am a nurse," Rose shot back. "That's why this cover works. The cover works because Falcone is paranoid and thinks everyone's out to get him," Chin said. "Which, to be fair, they are. We've had 3 attempts to plant agents in his organization in the past year. All failed. You're our best shot at bringing him down, and you're wasting time on his kids." Rose felt her jaw tighten. Those kids were caught in crossfire from the Corsini hit. They're 7 years old. They didn't choose this life. Neither did the 6 people Falcone had killed last year, Webb said flatly. Or the 12 the year before. Or the families destroyed by the drugs his organization moves through the city. You want to save those kids?
Great.
We all do. But the way you save them is by putting their father in prison where he belongs. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rose knew he was right. She joined this task force because she believed in justice. Because Nico Falcone was a criminal who'd built an empire on violence and corruption. Because men like him needed to be stopped. But then she'd met Marco and Lucia. She'd seen the way they flinched at loud noises. The way Lucia cried silently into her pillow when she thought nobody was watching. The way Marco asked if the bad men were coming back. They were victims too. And they were getting worse in that house, surrounded by armed guards and their father's paranoia, with nobody fighting for them. "I can do both," Rose said finally. "I can get you what you need and help those kids." Chin closed her laptop. "You're getting emotionally involved. That's exactly what we were afraid of. I'm doing my job." "Your job," Webb said, leaning forward, "is about to change. We got a court order this morning. Federal judge signed off on an expanded warrant. We're not just gathering intelligence anymore. We're moving toward arrest. Which means we need concrete evidence within the next 30 days, or we pull you out." 30 days. Rose's stomach dropped. That's not enough time to what? Fix 2 paralyzed kids. Webb's voice softened slightly. "Rose, I know this is hard. But those children have a whole team of doctors. They have resources we can only dream of. What they don't have is a case against their father that will stick. That's what you're there for." Rose wanted to argue. Wanted to tell them that the doctors had given up, that the resources were wasted without proper application, that Marco's toes had moved, and that meant something. But she was a cop first. She'd taken an oath. "What do you need?" she asked. Chun handed her a small device, no bigger than a USB drive. "Plant this in Falcone's office. It'll clone his hard drive wirelessly. Financial records, communications, everything. We also need you to document his meeting locations, identify his lieutenants, record any conversations about illegal activities." "He has cameras everywhere," Rose said. "If he sees me in his office." "Then be smart," Webb said. "You're Detective Rosanna Marlin. 6 years on the force, 2 commendations, one of the best undercover operators we have. You didn't get this assignment by accident." Rose took the device, felt its weight in her palm. It was so small. Such a tiny thing to destroy a man's life. "There's something else," Chin said, pulling up a file on her screen. "We have intel that the Corsini family is planning another hit.
Soon.
They want Falcone dead, and they're not particular about collateral damage. The twins, Rose whispered. Could be in danger, yes. Which is why we need to move fast. You get us what we need, we arrest Falcone, and we put those kids into protective custody where they'll actually be safe. Rose nodded slowly, but her mind was racing. Protective custody meant foster care. It meant being separated from everything they knew. It meant trauma on top of trauma. 1 month, Webb repeated. Then this ends, one way or another. Rose left the van 20 minutes later with a cloning device in her pocket and a knot in her stomach. As she drove back toward the mansion, her phone buzzed again. A text from the mansion's head of security, Dante. Mr. Falcone requests your presence in the warehouse district tomorrow, 7 a.m. A car will pick you up. Her blood went cold. Warehouse district. That's where bodies ended up. That's where people who betrayed Nico Falcone went to die. He knew. Somehow he knew. Rose pulled over, forcing herself to breathe.
No.
If he knew, she'd already be dead. This was something else. A test, maybe. Or legitimate business. She texted back. I'll be ready. Then she sat in her car in the darkness, caught between two worlds, and wondered which one would destroy her first. The law she'd sworn to uphold, or the family she was supposed to betray. The black SUV picked Rose up at exactly 7 a.m. She'd barely slept, running through scenarios in her head. If Nico knew she was a cop, she was already dead. If this was a test, she needed to pass it. If it was legitimate business, she needed to observe everything for the task force. The driver said nothing during the 20-minute ride to the harbor district. Rose watched the city transform through the tinted windows, from manicured suburbs to industrial wasteland. Rusted shipping containers stacked like metal tombstones. Warehouses with broken windows and graffiti-tagged walls. The smell of seawater and decay seeping through the vehicle's air conditioning. They pulled up to a nondescript building near the docks. From the outside, it looked abandoned. But Rose noticed the new locks, the security cameras hidden in the eaves, the fresh tire marks in the gravel. Dante met her at the door. His face was unreadable as always. Mr. Falcone is inside. Follow me. Her heart hammered as she walked through the entrance. The warehouse interior was exactly what she'd feared. Concrete floors stained dark in places she didn't want to think about, metal support beams, harsh fluorescent lighting that hummed like dying insects. In the center, a single table surrounded by 4 men. Nico stood at the head, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. To his right sat an older woman with silver hair pulled into a severe bun. Rose recognized her from surveillance photos as Lucia Falcone Sr., Nico's aunt and advisor. To his left, a heavy-set man in his 40s with careful eyes, Vito Romano, financial operations. And, across from them, Dante took his position. Miss Marlin, Nico said, his voice echoing in the empty space. Thank you for coming. Rose kept her expression neutral. Professional. Of course, Mr. Falcone. Though I'm confused why you need me here. The twins are still asleep, Nico interrupted. And being monitored by security. This meeting is about them. Indirectly, he gestured to an empty chair.
Please. Seat.
Every instinct screamed at her to run. But Detective Rosanna Marlin didn't run. She sat. Nico remained standing, his dark eyes fixed on her. I'll be direct. I don't trust easily.
Can't afford to.
3 months ago, someone tried to kill me and succeeded in destroying my children's lives. That makes me careful about who I allow near them. I understand, Rose said carefully. Do you? Lucia Sr. spoke for the first time, her voice sharp as broken glass. Because from where we sit, you're a stranger who appeared at a very convenient time with very impressive credentials. Too impressive, perhaps. Rose's pulse quickened, but she kept her face calm. I'm a pediatric nurse with trauma specialization. Those credentials took me years to earn. 5 years at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, Vito read from a tablet. Excellent reviews. 2 years in private care before this. Licensed, bonded, background check clean as a whistle. He looked up. Almost too clean. I don't understand what you're implying, Rose said, though she understood perfectly. Nico circled the table slowly, like a shark. Last night, I watched you work with my children. I watched you perform therapy techniques that my expensive doctors said wouldn't work. I watched my son's toes move for the first time in 3 months. And I watched you mark it in a private notebook that you then locked in your bag. Rose's mouth went dry. She'd been careful. She'd checked for cameras, but clearly not careful enough. You're good at your job, Nico continued. Too good. Which makes me wonder, what's your real job, Miss Marlin? The question hung in the air like a blade. This was the moment. Rose had been trained for this. Burned agents either panicked or overcompensated. The key was to stay in character while showing appropriate emotion. My real job, she said, allowing anger to seep into her voice, is helping children recover from trauma. Which is what I was doing. Your son's response was significant, Mr. Falcone. It means his nerve pathways aren't completely severed. It means there's hope. And I documented it because that's what medical professionals do. We keep records. Show me the notebook, Dante said. No, Rose stood, meeting Nico's gaze. That notebook contains private medical observations about your children. It's protected by patient confidentiality, and I won't violate that. Not for you. Not for anyone. If you don't trust me, fire me. But don't ask me to compromise my professional ethics. The silence stretched. Lucia Sr. studied her with the intensity of a woman who'd survived decades in a man's world by reading people perfectly. Vito's fingers hovered over his tablet, ready to pull up more information. Dante's hand rested casually near his jacket, near his gun. Nico's expression remained unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. Not warmly, but with something like respect. Vito, he said. Run a deeper check. Medical records, bank accounts, phone records, everything. I want to know what she had for breakfast 5 years ago. Already started, boss, Vito replied. Good. Nico turned back to Rose. Here's what's going to happen. You'll continue working with Marco and Lucia. You'll continue your therapy. But understand this. I'm watching everything. Every movement, every conversation, every person you contact. If you're who you say you are, you have nothing to worry about. If you're not, he let the threat hang unfinished. I'm exactly who I say I am, Rose said firmly. A nurse trying to help your children walk again. We'll see. Lucia Sr. stood, ending the meeting. But know this, girl. This family has survived by being suspicious of everyone. Especially people who seem too good to be true. As Rose was escorted back to the SUV, her mind raced. They were digging deeper. Webb had promised her cover would hold under scrutiny, but promises weren't bulletproof. And now she had both the police department and the Mafia investigating her simultaneously. The driver remained silent on the ride back. Rose stared out the window, watching the city transform again, from industrial decay to suburban safety. Two worlds, right next to each other, pretending the other didn't exist. Her phone buzzed. A text from Webb. Status report.
Now.
She typed back. Compromised. They're running deep background. Need immediate cover reinforcement. The response came instantly. Already on it. Remember, 30 days. Don't lose focus. Rose deleted both messages and closed her eyes. Don't lose focus.
Right.
Simple. Except nothing about this was simple anymore. Not when Marco's toes could move. Not when Lucia's laugh echoed in her memory. Not when she'd looked into Nico Falcone's eyes and seen not a monster, but a terrified father who'd lost control of everything that mattered. The SUV pulled up to the mansion. Through the window, Rose could see the twins' bedroom on the second floor. Marco waved from his wheelchair, his face lighting up when he saw her. She waved back, forcing a smile. 30 days to choose between saving 2 children or stopping a criminal empire. Rose was beginning to realize she might not be able to do both. 3 days after the warehouse meeting, Rose convinced Nico to let her take the twins outside. Not just outside, to a specialized therapy garden attached to St. Mary's Children's Rehabilitation Center, 40 minutes from the mansion. It's too exposed, Dante had argued during the security briefing. Too many variables. They're children who've been locked inside for 3 months, Rose countered. They need sunlight, fresh air. Normal experiences. You can send every guard you want, but I'm taking them to that garden. Nico had watched the exchange from his office doorway, arms crossed. Finally, he nodded. 3 security vehicles. 6 men. You deviate from the approved route. We pull you back immediately. Fine. Rose agreed, though her mind was already racing. 6 guards meant 6 witnesses. 6 people who might notice if she planted the cloning device. 6 complications. But it also meant Webb couldn't complain she wasn't trying to access intelligence. And more importantly, it meant Marco and Lucia got to be kids again, even if just for an hour. Now, standing in the therapy garden, Rose watched the twins' faces transform. The garden was beautiful, designed specifically for children with mobility challenges. Raised beds at wheelchair height filled with herbs and flowers. Smooth, wide pathways. Textured walls with different materials to touch, smooth river stones, rough bark, soft moss. A small fountain bubbled in the center, its sound peaceful rather than overwhelming. Can we touch everything? Lucia asked, her eyes wide. That's exactly what we're here for, Rose said, wheeling her closer to a bed of lavender. Close your eyes. Tell me what you feel. Lucia reached out, running her fingers through the purple blooms. It's soft. And it smells like Grandma's closet used to smell. Before the assassination attempt. Before everything changed. Rose saw the shadow cross Lucia's face and quickly redirected. That's lavender. People use it to help them relax and sleep better. Want to try something completely different? She wheeled both twins to the texture wall, where a section of tree bark contrasted with polished marble and rough sandstone. Marco pressed his palm against the bark, then the stone, comparing sensations. The bark feels like it's alive, he said quietly. Like it has grooves and patterns. The stone is cold and flat. Exactly, Rose said. Your hands are giving your brain information. Now let's see if we can get your feet to do the same thing. She'd brought a shallow tray filled with different materials, sand, smooth pebbles, dried beans, soft fabric. Carefully, she removed Marco's shoes and socks, lowering his feet into the sand. She'd done this with dozens of patients, but it always felt like magic, watching the brain relearn what the body had forgotten. Can you feel that? She asked. Marco's brow furrowed in concentration. I don't know. Maybe. Rose moved his foot slowly through the sand, creating resistance. Don't think about moving. Just think about feeling. The temperature, the texture. Let your brain remember. Around them, 6 security guards stood at strategic positions. Rose spotted them trying to look casual, one pretending to read a newspaper on a bench, 2 browsing the gift shop visible through a window, 3 positioned at different exits. All of them watching her. One guard, younger than the others, stood closer. Rose had seen him at the mansion. Tony, Dante had called him. He watched the twins with something that looked like sadness. Miss Rose. Lucia's voice pulled her attention back. My foot feels warm. Like tingly warm. Rose's heart jumped. She moved Lucia's foot from sand to smooth pebbles, watching carefully. And now. Different.
Like.
Little bumps? Is that real, or am I imagining it? It's real, Rose said, trying to keep the excitement from her voice. Your nerves are waking up. It takes time, but they're remembering their job. For the next 30 minutes, Rose worked with both twins, creating games that disguised therapy as play. She had them sort objects by texture while she moved their feet through different materials. She sang silly songs that made them laugh while she performed range of motion exercises. She challenged them to describe sensations in creative ways. Marco said the beans felt like tiny hard pillows, which made Lucia giggle so hard she snorted. The sound of children laughing drew attention from other families in the garden. Rose saw them glance over, smile, then look away respectfully. Normal families having normal days, unaware they were 50 feet from a Mafia boss's children and half a dozen armed guards. Rose, Marco said suddenly, his voice serious. Are we going to walk again? Really? Rose knelt beside his wheelchair, meeting his eyes. I can't promise that, Marco. I wish I could, but I can't. What I can promise is that I'll fight for every inch of progress. And I'll never lie to you about what's possible. The other doctors gave up on us, Lucia said quietly. We heard them tell Papa there was no point in trying. Then they were wrong, Rose said firmly. There's always a point in trying. Even if you never walk again, and I believe you will, there's still a point. Because trying means living. It means not giving up. And you two are fighters. I knew that the minute I met you.
How?
Marco asked. Because you're still here. Still smiling. Still asking questions. That takes more strength than walking ever did. Tony, the young guard, turned away quickly, but not before Rose saw him wipe his eyes. She filed that away, potential ally, or at least someone with a conscience. As they prepared to leave, Rose noticed Lucia's hand move slightly, fingers flexing on their own. She caught Rose's eye, a question in her gaze. Rose nodded. Progress. Real progress. On the drive back to the mansion, squeezed between two security vehicles, Rose watched the twins chatter about the garden. They were still trapped in wheelchairs, still paralyzed, still victims of a world they didn't choose. But for 1 hour, they'd been kids again. Her phone buzzed. A text from Webb, making progress on evidence. Rose looked at the twins, then at the guards surrounding them, then at the cloning device still hidden in her bag. She'd had multiple chances to plan it. Nico's office door had been unlocked twice this week. But each time, something stopped her. She typed back, working on it. Webb's response was immediate. Work faster. 26 days left. Rose deleted the messages and stared out the window. 26 days to destroy a family. 26 days to save 2 children from their father, even though their father was the only parent they had left. 26 days to figure out which side of the law she really stood on. Beside her, Lucia reached over and squeezed her hand. Thank you for today, she whispered. It was the best day since everything happened. Rose squeezed back, her throat tight. You're welcome, sweetheart. Through the rearview mirror, she caught Tony's eyes. He'd heard the exchange. For just a moment, something passed between them, an understanding that they were both trapped in a world of violence, trying to protect something innocent. Then the moment passed, and they were just guard and target again. But Rose filed it away, because in 26 days, she might need every ally she could get. It was 2:47 a.m. when Nico finally admitted to himself that he wasn't looking for evidence of betrayal anymore. He'd been in his office for 6 hours, bourbon bottle within reach, but largely ignored, watching footage from the past week. The screens glowed in the darkness, 6 different angles of his children's lives, cataloged and time-stamped like evidence in a trial. But somewhere around midnight, it had stopped being surveillance and started being something else. He watched Rose wake Marco from a nightmare at 3 a.m., not with clinical detachment, but by sitting on the edge of his bed, holding his hand, humming something soft until his breathing steadied. The audio was poor, but Nico could read her lips. You're safe. I'm here. You're safe. He watched her spend 20 minutes helping Lucia brush her own hair, something the girl hadn't been able to do since the attack. Rose positioned the brush in Lucia's hand, guided her arm through the motions, celebrated each successful stroke like it was a miracle. When Lucia finally managed 3 strokes alone, Rose had actually teared up. He watched her eat lunch with them, not at a separate table like the previous nannies, but right there between their wheelchairs, making airplane noises with their forks and telling terrible jokes that made them groan and giggle simultaneously. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Rose asked on screen. Why? The twins chorused. Because he was outstanding in his field. Marco had thrown a grape at her. She'd thrown one back. For 5 minutes, his children had engaged in a food fight, laughing so hard they could barely breathe, while Rose pretended to be mortally wounded by each hit. Nico rewound that section. Watched it again. When was the last time he'd played with them? Really played, not just existed in the same room. The answer came with brutal clarity. Before the attack. before he'd become so consumed with revenge and paranoia that he'd forgotten how to be a father. He switched to the garden footage from earlier today. The security team had sent it over immediately, every angle captured. Nico had watched it once already, looking for security breaches. Now he watched it again, looking for something else. Rose kneeling in the sand, her scrubs getting dirty as she worked with Marco's feet. The concentration on her face. The gentle way she moved his ankle, testing responses. The excitement, genuine excitement, when Lucia reported feeling tingling. "Your nerves are waking up," Rose said on screen. "It takes time, but they're remembering their job." Nico paused the video. Zoomed in on his children's faces. When had he last seen them look like that? So full of hope. His mind drifted back unwillingly to that night 3 months ago. Giordano's restaurant. He'd taken the family for Lucia's senior's birthday. A public appearance, which his advisors had warned against, but he'd been arrogant. Untouchable. 20 years in this business, and he'd never been hit. Never been vulnerable. The Corsini family had been waiting. It happened so fast. The front windows exploding inward. Glass and bullets everywhere. His security returning fire. People screaming. And, in the middle of it all, his children. Marco had been standing beside the table when the first shots hit. Nico watched him fall, watched his small body crumple. Lucia had tried to run to her brother and caught the ricochet that severed her spinal cord. Nico had killed 3 men that night with his bare hands. His security had killed 5 more. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The doctors had been blunt. Severe spinal trauma, extensive nerve damage, permanent paralysis likely. They'd recommended accepting the new reality. Adjusting expectations. Learning to cope with loss. And Nico had. He'd turned his grief into rage, his guilt into paranoia. He'd fortified the mansion, tripled his security, started planning revenge against the Corsinis so elaborate it would take months to execute. But he hadn't held his children, hadn't sat with them, hadn't let them see him cry. He'd been too afraid. Afraid that if he acknowledged how badly he'd failed them, if he let himself feel the full weight of his guilt, it would destroy him. So instead, he'd hired nannies. Professional distance. Clinical care. People who could do what he couldn't, actually be present for Marco and Lucia. And then Rose had arrived. Nico switched to a different camera angle. Rose sitting between the twins' beds after they'd fallen asleep, updating her mysterious notebook. He'd had tech experts try to hack it, but it was encrypted. Whatever she was documenting, she was serious about keeping it private. His phone buzzed. A text from Vito. Deep background check complete. Sending full report now. Nico's laptop chimed. He opened the file, expecting to find proof of Rose's deception. Proof that his instincts were right, that she was too good to be true. Instead, he found exactly what she'd claimed. Rosanna Marlin, 32, born in Philadelphia. Parents deceased. Father died of cancer when she was 19, mother in a car accident when she was 24.
No siblings.
Put herself through nursing school, working double shifts. 5 years at Children's Hospital with exceptional reviews. 2 years in private care. No criminal record. No suspicious financial activity. No red flags. Too clean, his paranoid mind insisted. Nobody's that clean. But his exhausted heart whispered something different. Maybe some people really are just good. He pulled up the most recent footage. Today's therapy session, the moment when Lucia had felt tingling in her feet. The way Rose had looked at his daughter, with such fierce hope, such determination, made something crack in Nico's chest. This woman, this stranger, was fighting for his children with more intensity than he'd shown in months. Nico stood abruptly, knocking over the bourbon bottle. It spilled across his desk, soaking papers and photographs. He didn't care. He walked to the window overlooking the East Wing, where his children slept, where Rose slept in the room between theirs like a guardian. When was the last time he'd tucked them in? Read them a story? Asked about their day? The answer was before. Always before. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window, scarred face, haunted eyes, the ghost of the man he used to be. He'd built an empire on violence and fear. He'd survived assassination attempts, gang wars, federal investigations. He'd buried enemies and allies alike. But he couldn't walk into his children's bedroom and tell them he loved them. Couldn't face the accusation in their eyes. You did this to us. You and your world of blood and bullets. On the monitor, Rose stirred in her sleep, her door slightly ajar, so she could hear if the twins needed her. Even in rest, she was on guard, protecting them, doing the job Nico should have been doing all along. His phone buzzed again. Lucia Sr., the Corsini shipment arrives tomorrow night. Are you ready to move? Nico looked at the message, then at the monitors, then at his reflection. 6 months ago, he would have responded immediately with overwhelming force. Would have made the Corsinis pay in blood for what they'd done to his family. But revenge wouldn't make Marco walk. Wouldn't erase Lucia's nightmares. Wouldn't give back the childhood he'd stolen from them by choosing this life. He typed back, delay. I need more time. Then, he did something he hadn't done since the attack. He walked to the east wing, opened the door to his children's room, and sat in the chair beside their beds.
Marco stared. Papa.
Sure, Nico whispered. Go back to sleep. I'm here. You never sit with us anymore, Marco said quietly. The words hit like bullets. I know.
I'm sorry.
Are you still angry at us? Nico's breath caught.
What? No.
Why would I? Because we got hurt, Lucia said from her bed, awake now too. Because it's our fault you got hurt too. No, Nico said, his voice breaking. No, none of this is your fault. It's mine. All mine. He couldn't say more. His throat closed, years of suppressed grief finally forcing its way out. He reached for their hands, both of them, and held on like a drowning man. They held him back. And for the first time in 3 months, Nico Falcone allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he'd lost and what he still had left to save. Rose knew something was wrong the moment she saw Webb's face. She'd driven to the emergency meeting location, a different parking garage this time, deeper security protocols, expecting a routine check-in. Instead, Webb stood beside the surveillance van with his arms crossed and Agent Chen holding a manila folder thick enough to be a weapon. Get in, Webb said. Not a request. Rose climbed into the van. The door slammed shut behind her, and suddenly the space felt suffocating. Chen sat across from her. Webb remained standing. The folder landed on the table between them with a heavy thud. 21 days left, Chen said, without preamble. And you've given us nothing. That's not true. I've documented security patterns, identified key personnel, mapped the mansion's layout. We already had most of that, Webb interrupted. What we don't have is hard evidence. Financial records. Communications. Proof of illegal activity that will hold up in federal court, he leaned forward. What we don't have is you doing your damn job. Rose felt her jaw tighten. I'm establishing trust. That takes time. Time we don't have. Chen opened the folder, pulled out a document with an official seal. This is a federal court order, signed yesterday by Judge Morrison. Your mission parameters have changed. You're no longer on intelligence gathering. You're on arrest preparation. The words hit like ice water. What does that mean? It means, Webb said, that we have credible intelligence the Corsini family is planning another attack.
Soon.
Multiple targets, including the Falcone mansion. Which means we need to move on Nico Falcone now, before this turns into a war that kills innocent people. The twins, Rose whispered, could be caught in the crossfire, yes. Along with you, the security staff, and anyone else in that house when the Corsinis make their move. Chen pulled out more documents, surveillance photos, intercepted communications, tactical maps. We've identified 3 potential attack vectors. The mansion security is good, but not good enough to stop a coordinated assault. Rose stared at the photos. Men with guns. Blueprints of the mansion. Red X marks over the children's wing. So we arrest Falcone, Webb continued, and we put those kids into protective custody where they'll actually be safe. Away from the violence. away from the target on their backs, just from being his children. Protective custody means foster care, Rose said. It means separating them from everything they know, from their father, from their home, from their recovery program. From a criminal enterprise built on drugs and murder, Chin cut in sharply. Rose, I know you've gotten attached. That's natural. But those children deserve better than being raised by a mobster in a house full of guns, waiting for the next assassination attempt. They deserve better than being ripped away from their father while they're still learning to feel their own feet again. Rose shot back. Do you have any idea what that kind of trauma would do to them? They've already been through hell. Which is why we need to end this, Webb said, his voice softening slightly. Look, I get it. I have kids too. But Nico Falcone isn't some misunderstood father figure. He's a killer. The file on him is 12 inches thick. Murders, racketeering, witness intimidation, drug trafficking. He's destroyed families, Rose. How many other kids are suffering because of what he does? The question hung in the air, heavy with truth. Rose thought about the neighborhoods she'd patrolled as a beat cop before making detective. The overdoses, the gang violence, the children caught in crossfire that had nothing to do with them. How much of that traced back to men like Nico Falcone? But then she thought about Marco's toes curling in the sand, Lucia's laughter in the garden, the way they'd finally started sleeping through the night because someone was actually fighting for them. What do you need? Rose asked quietly. Chun slid a small device across the table, different from the cloning drive, sleeker. This is a keylogger. Planted on Falcone's personal computer. It'll capture every password, every communication, every financial transaction. We'll have everything we need within 72 hours. His office is monitored, Rose said. Cameras everywhere. Then create a situation that gets you in there legitimately. Medical emergency with one of the kids. Security briefing about their care. Use your imagination, Webb leaned forward. But understand this. If you don't plant that device within the next week, we're pulling you out. And we're coming in with a warrant that might not distinguish between armed security and non-combatants. The threat was clear. Plant the device or people would die. Maybe the twins. Maybe Rose herself. There's something else, Chin said, pulling out another document. This one had Rose's signature at the bottom, her original undercover agreement. The department brass is getting nervous. If this operation fails, they're looking for someone to blame. And right now you're spending more time playing physical therapist than gathering intelligence. Are you threatening to charge me? Rose asked, disbelief coloring her voice. I'm telling you that there are consequences for obstruction of justice, Chin said carefully. Even for cops. Especially for cops who let personal feelings compromise an investigation. Rose felt the walls closing in. I need to talk to my union rep. You can't, Webb said. Deep cover means no contact with anyone who might compromise your identity. You know that. You signed off on it. They had her trapped. Do the job or face criminal charges. Save the twins from their father or save them from the Corsinis. Choose between her oath as a police officer and her conscience as a human being. 1 week, Chin repeated, standing. Plant the device. We'll handle the rest. Rose took the keylogger, felt its weight in her palm. So small. Such a tiny thing to destroy a family. What happens to the twins, she asked. After you arrest him? They'll be placed with child services temporarily, Webb said. The system will find them a good home. Maybe together, if we're lucky. They'll get medical care, therapy, a chance at a normal life. They're finally making progress, Rose interrupted, her voice cracking. Marco moved his toes yesterday. Actually moved them, voluntary motion. Lucia can feel temperature changes in both feet now. In 3 weeks, I've done more for them than months of specialists did. And you want me to rip them away from that? From me. The silence stretched. Webb looked away first. I'm sorry, he said, and he sounded like he meant it. But this is bigger than 2 kids. Falcone's organization moves 50 kilos of heroin through this city every month. That's 50,000 doses. 50,000 chances for someone to overdose, for a family to be destroyed, for a kid to lose a parent. How many children are we supposed to sacrifice to save his two? Rose had no answer for that. Because he was right. The math was brutal but clear. 2 lives versus thousands. Her feelings versus her duty. The children she could touch versus the ones she'd never meet. 1 week, she said finally, pocketing the device. Chen nodded. Status updates every 48 hours. No exceptions. Rose left the van, her legs unsteady. The parking garage was quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, staring at nothing, the keylogger burning a hole in her pocket. Her phone buzzed. A text from the mansion. Marco asking for you. Says his foot feels funny.
Dante.
Rose closed her eyes. Marco's foot feeling funny was huge. It meant nerve regeneration, increased sensation, possible voluntary movement. It meant hope. But in 1 week, if she did her job, Marco would be in foster care. Lucia would be in foster care. And Nico Falcone would be in federal prison. She started her car, began the drive back to the mansion. Back to the twins who trusted her. Back to the father who was finally learning to be present. Back to the life she was about to destroy. 1 week to choose. Officer or traitor, savior or destroyer, duty or heart. Rose was terrified she'd already made her choice. And it was the wrong one. The invitation came on Rose's 5th day back at the mansion. Dante delivered it personally, his expression unreadable as always. Mr. Falcone requests your presence for dinner tonight. 8 o'clock. His private restaurant on the coast. Dress is. Not scrubs. Rose looked up from where she was helping Marco practice grip exercises. Is this about the twins? He didn't say. Just said to tell you it's not optional, Dante paused. But bring nothing. No bags, no phone. You'll be screened. After he left, Marco whispered, Is Papa mad at you? I don't think so, Rose said, though her heart was racing.
Why?
He takes people to that restaurant when he needs to talk serious. We heard Aunt Lucia say that once. Serious talks at private restaurants. Rose's mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios. He'd found something. Cracked her cover. Discovered the police connection. This was how it ended, not with arrests and warrants, but with a quiet conversation and a body that would never be found. But she had no choice except to go. At 7:45 p.m., another black SUV arrived. Different driver, same silent treatment. The coastal highway stretched before them, dark ocean on one side, cliffs on the other. The restaurant appeared after 20 minutes, a converted lighthouse perched on a rocky outcrop, lights glowing warm against the twilight sky. The place had been cleared. Rose noticed it immediately. No other cars in the lot, no guests visible through the windows. Just bodyguards stationed at strategic points, their presence barely concealed. Inside, the restaurant was beautiful. Exposed brick walls, candlelight, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. And at a corner table with the best view, Nico Falcone waited. He stood when she entered, which surprised her. He changed from his usual dark suits into something slightly less formal, still expensive, still perfectly tailored, but charcoal gray instead of black. Almost like he was trying to seem less threatening. It didn't work. He was still Nico Falcone, and she was still entering the lion's den. Miss Marlin, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Rose asked, sitting. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Not really. But I appreciate the illusion of politeness. He nodded to someone she couldn't see, and a server appeared with wine. I hope you don't mind. I took the liberty of ordering. The chef here is particular about preparation time. This is your restaurant. I own it. Used to come here with, he stopped, redirected. I come here when I need to think. The server poured wine and disappeared. They were alone, or as alone as two people could be with armed guards outside every exit. Rose waited. Let him make the first move. Nico studied her for a long moment, then said, Marco walked 3 steps yesterday. Rose's breath caught. What? After you left for the evening. I was sitting with them, something I've been trying to do more often, and he asked if he could try. Said his legs felt tingly, like they were waking up from being asleep. Nico's voice carried an emotion Rose couldn't quite identify. He held onto the parallel bars we installed, and he took 3 steps. His legs shook. He nearly fell twice. But he walked. That's incredible, Rose said and meant it. 3 steps. 3 impossible, miraculous steps. Did you video it? Every angle. Dante sent you the footage. Nico paused. He couldn't do it again afterward. Got too tired. But he did it once. Once is enough, Rose said. Once means it's possible. The neural pathways are reconnecting. With more therapy, more time. How much time? The question hung between them. Rose chose her words carefully. Every patient is different. But if Marco's already walking even just a few steps? Weeks, maybe. Not months. Lucia's progressing too, just at a different pace. Nico picked up his wine glass, but didn't drink. The other doctors said it was impossible. That I should accept reality and focus on adaptation. Wheelchairs for life. Modified home. Specialized care. He finally looked at her. Why were they wrong? They weren't wrong to be cautious, Rose said. Spinal injuries are unpredictable. But they gave up too soon. They saw the damage and stopped looking for the possibility. And you didn't. I never do. The food arrived, some kind of pasta dish Rose couldn't identify. Beautifully plated, probably obscenely expensive. She wasn't hungry, but she ate because not eating would be suspicious. I want to understand your methods, Nico said. The exercises you do with them. The equipment you're using. The therapy philosophy. All of it. For the next 20 minutes, Rose explained. She kept it clinical, professional, using medical terminology when necessary but translating it into terms a layman could understand. Nico listened with complete focus, asking intelligent questions about nerve regeneration, muscle memory, neuroplasticity. You sound like a doctor, he observed. I work with doctors. You pick things up. Or you had more training than a typical nurse would have. Rose's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. I specialized in pediatric trauma. It requires additional certification. Nico set down his fork. I had my people look into you.
Deeply.
Your credentials check out. Your history checks out. Even your parking tickets check out. He leaned forward slightly. So, why do I still feel like you're hiding something? This was it. The moment of truth. Rose met his eyes. Everyone hides something, Mr. Falcone. The question is whether what I'm hiding matters to you. Does it affect my children?
No.
Does it put them in danger? Rose hesitated 1 second too long. Not from me, but from someone else. She couldn't answer that. Couldn't tell him about the Corsini threat, about the planned raid, about the keylogger in her apartment that she still hadn't planted. Nico saw the hesitation. His expression shifted, something cold creeping into his eyes. I asked you a question, and I can't answer it, Rose said carefully. Not because I don't want to, because there are things I don't know. The world is dangerous, Mr. Falcone. Your world especially. I can't promise your children are safe. Nobody can. But you're trying to protect them. Yes. From me? The question landed like a punch. Rose looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the scars on his face, the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried. This wasn't the interrogation she'd expected. This was something else. Not from you, she said quietly. From the consequences of your choices. Nico leaned back, a bitter smile crossing his face. At least you're honest. He picked up his wine, finally drank. I've spent 20 years building an empire. Power, money, respect, everything that's supposed to matter. And it cost me my children's ability to walk. Tell me, Miss Marlin, was it worth it? You're asking the wrong person. Am I? You see them every day. You see what they've lost. What I took from them by being who I am. His voice dropped. Do they hate me? Rose thought about Marco asking if his father was still angry at them. About Lucia believing they were to blame for the attack. About 2 children who desperately loved their father but had no idea how to reach him anymore. They don't hate you, Rose said. They're afraid they disappointed you. Nico's hand tightened on his glass. That's worse. Yes, Rose agreed. It is. The silence stretched. Outside, waves crashed against the rocks. Inside, two people sat across from each other, separated by lies and loyalty and the weight of choices neither could take back. Finally, Nico spoke. I need to know I can trust you. Rose looked down at her plate, away from his eyes, away from the intensity of his gaze. I'm doing everything I can for Marco and Lucia, she said. That's all I can promise. When she glanced back up, Nico was studying her with the focus of a man who'd survived 2 decades in a business where trust was currency and betrayal was death. You keep avoiding my eyes when I mention trust, he observed.
Why?
Because she was lying. Because in 3 days, she had to either plant the keylogger or face obstruction charges. Because she was a cop sitting across from a criminal, pretending to be something she wasn't. Because trust is complicated, Rose said finally. And I'm not sure either of us knows what it means anymore. Nico considered this, then nodded slowly. At least that's honest. The dinner ended shortly after. Nico paid, though the restaurant was his, and walked her to the SUV. Before she got in, he said, they've started asking about their mother. Rose froze. In all her research, she'd found almost nothing about the twins' mother. She left when they were 2, Nico continued, staring at the dark ocean. Said she couldn't raise children in this world.
I didn't blame her then.
I blame her now. They needed her, and she chose her conscience over her kids. He looked at Rose. Don't do that to them. Whatever else you are, whatever secrets you're keeping, don't be another person who abandons them. Rose felt the words like a knife. I won't. Good, he stepped back. Dante will drive you home. As the SUV pulled away, Rose watched Nico standing alone outside his empty restaurant, silhouetted against the lighthouse beam. A powerful man who'd realized too late that power couldn't protect the things that actually mattered. And Rose realized something terrifying. She was starting to feel sorry for him. Worse, she was starting to understand him. The keylogger felt like lead in her pocket. 3 days left to decide who she was going to betray. The afternoon was perfect. Clear sky, warm sun, gentle breeze carrying the salt smell from the distant ocean. Rose had convinced Dante to let her take the twins to the mansion's outdoor playground, a private area surrounded by high walls but open to the air. Marco had been restless all morning, eager to practice walking. He'd managed 5 steps that morning, then 7. Each attempt left him exhausted and shaking, but the determination in his eyes was fierce. Lucia was progressing too, reporting sensation up to her knees now, sometimes feeling when Rose touched her thigh. They needed sunshine, fresh air, a sense of normalcy. Just 30 minutes, Dante had said, positioning 3 guards around the perimeter. And stay within camera range. Now Marco sat in his wheelchair near the adapted swing set, laughing as Rose pushed Lucia gently. The swing was modified with a supportive back and harness, allowing her to feel the motion even without leg strength. Higher, Lucia called out. Any higher and you'll achieve orbit, Rose teased, but she pushed a little harder. Lucia's laughter rang out, pure and unguarded.
Marco clapped.
My turn next. Rose was reaching for the swing to slow it down when she heard something that made her blood freeze. A sound she'd been trained to recognize. A sound that shouldn't exist in this moment of peace. The distinctive crack of a rifle shot. Everything happened in 3 seconds. The bullet struck the stone wall 2 feet from Lucia's swing, sending chips of masonry exploding outward. Rose's body moved before her mind caught up, training from another life taking over. She threw herself at Lucia, ripping the harness release as she yanked the girl from the swing. Down, Rose screamed, diving behind a large stone lion statue that decorated the playground. She landed hard. Lucia clutched against her chest and immediately twisted to locate Marco. He was 10 feet away, frozen in his wheelchair, eyes wide with terror. More shots. The playground erupted in chaos, wood splintering, metal pinging, the whine of bullets cutting through air. Rose saw muzzle flashes from beyond the wall. Multiple shooters. Coordinated attack. The guards were returning fire, but there were only 3 of them and at least 6 attackers.
Marco.
Rose screamed. Grab your wheels and roll to me.
Now.
But Marco couldn't move. Paralyzed by fear, reliving the restaurant, the night his world exploded. Rose made a choice. She shoved Lucia behind the stone lion. Stay down.
Don't move.
Count to 100-inch. Rose, no. But Rose was already moving, running in a crouch across open ground. Her mind calculated angles, trajectory, cover points. Not like a nurse. Like a cop. Like someone with tactical training she shouldn't have. She reached Marco's wheelchair just as a bullet struck its armrest, missing his hand by inches. Without hesitation, Rose grabbed the handles and shoved, propelling the wheelchair across the playground at full speed. Bullets tracked them. She heard one pass, so close it disturbed her hair. Behind the stone lion, she positioned both children against its bulk, putting herself between them and the shooters. Security to the playground, she shouted. Multiple hostiles. The children are exposed. One of Dante's guards, Tony, the young one, was closer now, providing covering fire. But one guard fell, clutching his shoulder. Another retreated, pinned down. Rose assessed the situation with trained precision. 6 shooters, maybe 7. Semi-automatic rifles. Coordinated fire patterns suggesting military or paramilitary training. They weren't trying to breach the wall. They were trying to kill everyone in the playground. This was an assassination attempt. On my signal, suppress fire at 11 o'clock, Rose called to Tony. Not like a civilian. Like someone who spoke this language. Tony didn't question it. He understood. Marco, Lucia, listen to me, Rose said, her voice urgent but controlled. When I say go, you're going to use your hands and pull yourselves behind that bench. She pointed to a heavy wooden bench 15 feet away, closer to the mansion. Drag yourselves. Don't worry about your legs. Just hands. Fast as you can. You understand. We can't, Marco started. Yes, you can. You're fighters. I know you are. Ready? She looked at Tony. He nodded. Suppressing. Tony shouted, leaning out and unleashing a sustained burst. Go! Rose yelled. The twins moved. Marco grabbed the ground and pulled, his upper body's strength surprising her. Lucia did the same, dragging herself across grass and gravel, not caring about the pain. Survival instinct overriding everything else. Rose covered them, positioning her body as a shield, calling out directions like she'd done in 100 training scenarios. Left shooter, stone wall. Right side advancing. Guard your 6. More security poured from the mansion, Dante leading them, along with 6 more armed men. The firepower shifted. The attackers realized they'd lost the advantage and began retreating. Within 90 seconds, it was over. Silence fell, broken only by the ringing in Rose's ears and Marco's ragged breathing. Everyone okay? Dante called, weapons still raised. Rose did a quick check. The twins were scraped and terrified but uninjured. Tony had a gash on his cheek from stone fragments. One guard was wounded but alive. We're good, Rose confirmed, then immediately shifted back to caregiver mode. Marco, Lucia, you're safe now. You did so good. So brave. But Lucia was staring at her with wide, confused eyes. You sounded different. You moved different. Like the guards. Before Rose could respond, Dante was there, radio in hand, barking orders. Lock down the mansion. Medical team to the east playground. Someone get Mr. Falco now. He looked at Rose, and in his eyes, she saw calculation. Questions. Suspicion. Where did you learn to move like that? He asked quietly. Survival instinct, Rose said, keeping her voice steady. Everyone has it. No, Dante said slowly. Not like that. That was training. A combat training. Rose opened her mouth to deflect, but Nico's voice cut through the air. What the hell happened? He was running across the lawn, surrounded by more guards, his face contorted with fury and fear. When he reached them, he dropped to his knees beside the twins, checking them for injuries with shaking hands. Papa, Lucia whispered, and started crying. Nico pulled both children against him, and for a moment he was just a father, not a mafia boss. You're safe. You're safe. Then his eyes found Rose, and something in his expression shifted. He'd been watching. Cameras everywhere. He'd seen everything.
Inside, he ordered.
Everyone.
Now.
The security team formed a protective box around them as they moved toward the mansion.
Rose pushed both wheelchairs, her mind racing.
The attack had been real. The danger was real. But she'd also just blown her cover by reacting like a trained operative instead of a scared nurse. As they entered the mansion, Dante pulled Nico aside. Rose couldn't hear what he said, but she saw him gesture toward her, saw Nico's jaw tighten. They knew, or at least suspected. That night, after the twins were finally asleep, traumatized but safe, Rose found Dante waiting in the hallway. "Mr. Falcone wants to see you," he said. "His office."
Now.
Rose followed him down the corridor, past security cameras she'd noted weeks ago, toward the office she'd been trying to access for the police. The office where she was supposed to plant the keylogger. But this wasn't how she'd planned to get in. Dante opened the door. Inside, the lights were dim. Nico sat behind his desk, multiple computer screens glowing around him. Footage from the playground attack played on loop. "Close the door," Nico said without looking up. "We need to talk about who you really are." The door clicked shut behind her, and Rose realized her time had just run out. The office was soundproofed. Rose noticed the thick door, the acoustic panels hidden behind expensive artwork, the way sound seemed to die the moment Dante closed them in. No one would hear her scream. Nico still hadn't looked at her. He sat behind his mahogany desk, fingers steepled, watching the playground footage on repeat. Rose standing in front of the twins. Rose moving with tactical precision. Rose calling out suppressing fire coordinates like she'd done it 1,000 times. Because she had.
"Sit," Nico said.
Not a request. Rose sat in the leather chair facing his desk, her heart hammering but her expression neutral. This was it. The moment every undercover agent feared. When the mask came off and you were left facing the person you'd been lying to, hoping your training would be enough to keep you alive. Nico finally looked up. His eyes were cold, empty of the vulnerability he'd shown at dinner, empty of the gratitude from earlier when she'd saved his children. This was the man who'd built an empire on violence. "I'm going to ask you one question," he said quietly. "And depending on your answer, you either walk out of this room or you don't. Understand?" Rose nodded. "Who are you really?" For a long moment, Rose considered lying, maintaining cover, creating some story about military family, combat training picked up from an ex-boyfriend, defensive tactics learned from self-defense classes. But as she looked at Nico, she realized something. He already knew. "How long have you known?" she asked instead. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Not amused. Bitter. "I suspected from the beginning. You were too good. Too clean. Too perfect." He turned one of his monitors toward her. "I finally got into the police database 2 days ago. Not easy. Your department's cybersecurity is better than I expected. But I have excellent hackers." On the screen was her personnel file. Detective Rosanna Marlin, badge number 2847, 6 years with the Philadelphia Police Department. Commendations. Undercover operations. Her real face in her academy photo, younger but unmistakably her. "So you've been playing me this whole time," Rose said. "No," Nico leaned forward. "I've been watching you, trying to figure out if you were here to hurt my children or help them. The police file told me what you are. It didn't tell me why you're really here." "To gather evidence against you," Rose said. "There was no point in lying now. To build a case that would put you in prison." And what? And what changed?" Nico's voice was sharp. "Because I've been watching that footage for 2 hours. I watched a cop, a trained detective, throw herself in front of bullets for my children. I watched you risk your life without hesitation. That's not evidence gathering. That's not duty. So I'm going to ask again. Were you here to destroy me or save them?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Rose thought about Webb's face in the van, about the court order, about 30 days that had turned into 3 weeks that had turned into this moment. Both, she said finally. I came here to destroy you. That was the mission. Plant surveillance devices, document your operations, build a federal case. I was supposed to be bait, get close to your children, earn your trust, and gather everything the task force needed to bring down your entire organization. And then I met Marco and Lucia. Rose's voice cracked slightly. I read their medical files. I saw what the attack did to them, not just physically. They were broken, Mr. Falcone. Completely broken. Your expensive doctors had given up. Your staff treated them like fragile dolls. She paused, chose her words carefully. You were so consumed by revenge that you forgot they were still alive. Nico's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. So, yes, I came here to destroy you. But I stayed to save them. And somewhere along the way, I realized those two goals might not be compatible. You were supposed to plant something, Nico said. Some kind of surveillance device. I saw you get handed something in the parking garage last week. My people followed you. Of course they did. Rose had been so careful, but not careful enough. A keylogger, she admitted. For your computer. It would clone your hard drive, give the task force access to everything. But you never planted it. No. Why not? Rose met his eyes. Because the day I was supposed to do it, Marco took his first steps. And I realized that putting you in prison means putting them in foster care. It means ripping them away from their home, from their therapy, from everyone they know, while they're still learning to walk again. It means destroying the progress we've made. And I couldn't, she stopped, steadied her voice. I couldn't do that to them. Nico studied her for a long moment. So you chose them over your duty. I chose them over my mission. My duty is more complicated than you think. Explain. Rose took a breath. I'm a cop because I believe in protecting people, especially children. That's why I joined. That's why I volunteered for this operation in the first place, because your organization moves drugs that destroy families, that kill people, that create victims. She leaned forward. But Marco and Lucia are victims too. They didn't choose your world. They're just kids who got caught in crossfire. Collateral damage, Nico said bitterly. Except they're not just damage. They're your children. And despite everything you've done, despite every crime in that file, she gestured at the computer, they love you. They're terrified they disappointed you. They think the attack was their fault. And you've been so absent, so locked in your own guilt and rage, that you haven't seen them falling apart. Nico's expression cracked slightly. I saw them today. I saw what you did for them. I did what any decent person would do. No, Nico stood, walked to the window overlooking the mansion grounds. You did what a parent would do. You protected them without thinking, without hesitation. While I was watching cameras from a safe room, you were throwing yourself in front of bullets. The silence stretched. Outside, security lights swept the lawn, searching for threats that had already fled. There's something else, Rose said. Something I found in the medical records that I don't think you know. Nico turned. What? The attack at the restaurant. The bullets that hit your children. Rose pulled out her phone. Dante had let her keep it, which meant Nico wanted her to have access to information. She pulled up photos she'd taken of medical reports. The trajectory was wrong. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that the bullets that paralyzed Marco and Lucia came from inside the restaurant, not outside. The Corsinis attacked through the windows, yes. But the shots that hit your children came from a different angle. A different weapon. She met his eyes. Someone in your organization shot your children, Mr. Falcone. The paralysis wasn't collateral damage. It was intentional. Nico's face went white. That's impossible. Imakop. I know gunshot wounds. I know ballistics. And I know when something doesn't add up. Rose stood. I couldn't figure out who or why. But someone wanted your children hurt. Someone wanted you vulnerable. Show me, Nico demanded. Rose pulled up the medical imaging, the entry wounds, the trajectory analysis she'd done on her own time. Nico stared at the evidence, his hands starting to shake. Who? He whispered. Who would? I don't know. But whoever ordered the Corsini hit today knew about the therapy sessions. Knew the twins would be outside. This wasn't random, Mr. Falcone. Someone's been trying to kill your children from the beginning. Nico slammed his fist on the desk hard enough to crack the wood. Get Dante in here.
Now.
Wait, Rose said. Before you do, you need to know something else. The police task force knows about today's attack. They're planning a raid. They have a federal warrant. They're coming for you within the next 72 hours, and they don't care about collateral damage. If you're here when they come, the twins will be caught in the crossfire. Then I'll fight them off. And how many people die? How many bullets fly through this mansion while your children are inside? Rose moved closer. You asked me if I came here to destroy you or save them. The answer is, I don't know anymore. But I know this. If you want your children to survive, really survive, not just physically but emotionally, something has to change. Nico looked at her. This cop who'd infiltrated his home, who'd lied to him for weeks, who'd just risked her life for his children. What are you proposing? He asked. Rose took a breath. This was it. The moment where she became either a hero or a traitor. Maybe both. An alliance, she said. You help me stop whoever's really trying to kill your family. I help you survive what's coming from the police. And together, we find a way to give Marco and Lucia a future that doesn't end in crossfire or foster care. You want me to work with a cop. I want you to work with someone who cares about your children's survival more than she cares about following orders. Nico was quiet for a long moment. Then, and the task force? Your partners? They'll consider me a traitor. I'll probably lose my badge. Maybe face charges. Rose's voice was steady. But your children took 3 steps yesterday. They laughed today despite being shot at. That matters more than my career. Nico extended his hand. Then we have a deal, Detective Marlin. Rose shook it, feeling the weight of everything she'd just sacrificed. Call me Rose, she said. And let's save your family. Dante entered the office to find his boss shaking hands with the woman he'd suspected was a cop for 2 weeks. The confusion on his face would have been comical in different circumstances. Sit down, Dante, Nico said. We have a lot to discuss. For the next hour, they worked. Rose laid out everything, the task force's timeline, the federal warrant, the evidence the police had and didn't have. Nico contributed his intelligence on the Corsinis, his suspicions about the internal betrayal, his understanding of how his organization functioned. The ballistics analysis Rose found changes everything, Nico said, pulling up financial records on his computer. Someone with inside access shot my children. Someone who knew where we'd be that night, who had clearance to be armed inside Giordano's, who could position themselves without raising suspicion. That's 6 possible people, Dante said grimly. Me, Vito, Aunt Lucia, Tony, Marco the driver, and you, Nico finished, looking at him directly. Any of us could be the traitor. Dante met his gaze, without flinching. I've been with you for 15 years, boss. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Unless you wanted something more subtle, like breaking me by destroying what I love most. The room fell silent. Rose watched the 2 men stare at each other, decades of loyalty being weighed against cold logic. Finally, Nico shook his head. Not you. You've had 1,000 chances to finish the job if you wanted me gone. But we can't rule out the others. Vito handles your money, Rose said, thinking out loud. If he wanted to take over, making you weak first would be smart. Stage a coup when you're vulnerable. Aunt Lucia raised me, Nico said. She's family. Family betrays family in this business all the time, Rose countered. You know that. Nico's jaw tightened, but he nodded. What do you propose? Rose pulled out her phone, opened her encrypted notes. The task force wants evidence of your illegal operations. They want names, transactions, proof that will hold up in court. What if we give it to them? Excuse me? Not your operations. Rose leaned forward. The Corsinis have been trying to kill you for months. They move drugs, weapons, probably human trafficking. They're violent, reckless, and most importantly, they have no protection. No cops on payroll, no federal connections. They're vulnerable. You want me to help the police arrest my enemies? Nico said slowly. I want you to help me build a legal case against the people who actually tried to murder your children today. And in exchange, Rose paused, knowing this was the critical moment. In exchange, you give up your organization. Willingly. Completely. That's insane. Is it? Rose challenged. Your empire nearly cost you everything. It made you a target. It paralyzed your children. It's the reason you can't walk down a street without armed guards. What exactly is it giving you besides blood and paranoia? Nico stood, paced to the window. I've built this for 20 years. And what will you have in 20 more? Dead children? A federal prison cell? Or a gravestone? Rose's voice softened. Marco took 3 steps yesterday. Lucia laughed today despite being shot at. Don't you want to be there for the day they run? Actually run, in a park, without checking for snipers? The silence stretched. Dante watched his boss wrestle with a decision that would rewrite his entire life. What would this alliance look like? Nico asked finally. Rose pulled out a notebook, started outlining. First, we identify the traitor in your organization. Set a trap, get proof, neutralize them. Second, you provide the police with everything they need to take down the Corsinis: locations, shipment schedules, financial records, communications. Make it airtight. And third, you cooperate with federal prosecutors. You give up your arms network, your drug pipelines, your money laundering operations. Everything. In exchange for immunity for crimes not involving murder and custody of your children. They'll never agree to that, Dante said. They will if the deal includes 3 ongoing homicide investigations being solved, Rose countered. My handler mentioned that specifically. The Corsinis are wanted for at least 3 high-profile murders. If Nico helps close those cases, he becomes valuable. And valuable people get deals. Nico turned from the window. What about you? You're burning your career for this. I made my choice the moment I didn't plant that keylogger. Rose met his eyes. I became a cop to protect people. That's what I'm doing. If the department can't see that, then maybe I'm in the wrong job. You'll need official cover, Dante said thoughtfully. Can't have you working with us if the task force thinks you've gone rogue. They'll pull you out, compromise everything. I'll handle my people, Rose said, though she had no idea how. Webb would be furious. Chun would recommend charges. But maybe if she brought them the Corsinis on a silver platter. There's still the immediate problem, Nico said. The task force is planning a raid within 72 hours. Even if we start this alliance now, we can't take down the Corsinis that fast. Rose thought for a moment, then grabbed her phone. What if we delay them? I tell my handler I'm close to a breakthrough, that Nico's starting to trust me, that I need more time to access his files. Buy us 2 weeks. Will they believe you? They have to. Because if they raid this mansion while your children are here, everyone's in danger. The task force, your security, Marco, and Lucia. She didn't finish the thought. Didn't have to. Nico made his decision. Okay. Here's what we do. Rose, you contact your handler, buy us time. Dante, you run a discreet investigation into everyone with access to Giordano's that night. I want phone records, financial transactions, anything unusual. And he pulled up files on his computer, will compile everything I have on the Corsinis operations. This is crazy, Dante muttered. Working with a cop. Giving up the business. The families will think you've gone soft. The families aren't my priority anymore, Nico said firmly. My children are. And if going soft means they live to adulthood, then I'll be the softest man in Philadelphia. Rose stood. I need to make a call. Somewhere private. Use the study, Nico said. It's clean, no surveillance. As Rose left the office, Nico called after her. Detective Marlin. She turned. Thank you. For today. For saving them. Rose nodded, her throat tight, and left. In the study, she dialed Webb's number. He answered on the second ring. Where the hell have you been? We heard about an attack on the mansion. Are you compromised?
Fine.
The twins are fine. But Marcus, I need more time. Absolutely not. The raid is scheduled for. I'm getting close, Rose interrupted. Falcone's starting to trust me. Today's attack shook him up. He's vulnerable. Give me 2 weeks, and I can get you everything, the files, the passwords, all of it. Plus intel on the Corsinis that will close your homicide cases. A pause. The Corsinis? How would Falcone have intel on them? Because they're the ones who hit him. He's been investigating them for months, trying to find their weaknesses. I can get you everything if you just give me time. She could hear Webb breathing, weighing options. 2 weeks, he said finally. But Rose? If this goes sideways, I can't protect you. The brass is already asking questions about your progress. Don't make me regret this. You won't, Rose promised and hung up. She stood in the quiet study, staring at her phone. She'd just lied to her commanding officer. Bought time for a Mafia boss to dismantle his own empire. Bet everything on the impossible hope that a violent man could change. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Marco's 3 steps. Lucia's laugh. 2 children who'd been given up on by everyone except a cop who'd forgotten how to follow orders. She walked back to Nico's office. He and Dante looked up expectantly. 2 weeks, Rose said. Let's make them count. Nico smiled. Not the cold smile of a crime boss, but something warmer. More human. Then let's get to work, detective. They spread maps and files across the desk, an unlikely alliance forming in the shadows. A Mafia boss looking for redemption, a detective betraying her badge, and a loyal soldier caught between 2 worlds. All of them fighting for the same impossible goal, saving 2 children from a life built on violence. Outside, the twins slept peacefully, unaware that their future was being rewritten by 3 people who decided that love mattered more than law, more than loyalty, more than anything else. Sometimes saving a family means breaking every rule you ever believed in. Rose was starting to understand that lesson all too well. 13 days later, everything came together at once. Rose stood in the police command center, surrounded by screens showing 3 simultaneous operations across 3 cities. Webb paced behind her, coffee in hand, watching decades of police work culminate in a single coordinated strike. All teams in position. Chen's voice crackled through the radio. Waiting on your signal, Detective Marlin. Rose glanced at her phone. A text from Nico, sent 30 seconds ago. Package delivered. Vito is contained. You were right about everything.
Vito Romano.
The financial operator who'd been with Nico for 8 years. The man who handled every transaction, every bank account, every dollar that flowed through the Falcone empire. The traitor who'd shot 2 children to make their father vulnerable enough to overthrow. Dante had found the proof 5 days ago, hidden offshore accounts in Vito's name, communications with Corsini lieutenants, a payment of $2 million deposited the day after the restaurant attack. Vito had been planning a coup for months, using the Corsinis as cover while he positioned himself to take over. But he'd made one mistake. He'd underestimated how much a broken father would sacrifice for his children. Execute, Rose said into the radio. All teams go. The screens erupted with motion. Philadelphia, Harbor Docks. Nico's remaining loyal soldiers, led by Dante and Tony, hit the Corsini drug shipment exactly as planned. Not with violence. With cameras. With documentation. With evidence. They'd been tipped off by Nico himself, who'd spent 2 weeks feeding the Corsinis false information, making them think he was weak, distracted, ready to fall. The Corsinis had gotten sloppy, moving their largest shipment in months through a harbor that was suddenly crawling with federal agents. Rose watched the screen as FBI teams swarmed the docks. 70 kilos of heroin. 15 assault rifles. 3 Corsini family captains, all caught on camera coordinating the operation. Harbor team reports successful arrest. An agent called out. All primary targets in custody. 1 down. Miami, auction house. The Corsini's money laundering operation ran through a high-end art auction house in Miami. Rose had helped trace the financial records. Nico's files combined with her investigative skills, creating an airtight case. Chun led the Miami team personally, executing a warrant during a private auction attended by Corsini family leadership. On screen, Rose watched federal agents flood the building, arresting 24 people in designer suits who'd been bidding on paintings that didn't exist. Miami team reports 23 arrests, including Vincent Corsini himself. Chen's voice came through. We've got him on 3 counts of murder, racketeering, and enough financial crimes to put him away for life. 2 down. New York, Corsini family compound. The final piece was the most dangerous. The Corsini's base of operations in upstate New York, a fortified compound where they coordinated everything. Nico had provided blueprints, security schedules, everything. Rose watched the tactical team breach the gates. No shots fired. Nico had leaked false information that pulled most of the security away, leaving the compound vulnerable. Within minutes, agents were inside, securing evidence, making arrests. New York team reports compound secured. 12 arrests. We're looking at enough evidence to dismantle the entire organization. Webb set down his coffee, staring at the screens in disbelief. How did you get all this? This is months, years of intelligence work. I had help, Rose said simply. From who? Before Rose could answer, her phone buzzed. Another text from Nico. It's done. I'm out. She stepped away from the command center, found a quiet corner and called him. It worked, Nico said when he answered. His voice sounded different. Lighter. The Corsinis are finished. Vito's been handed over to the FBI. I gave them everything on him too. Attempted murder of minors, conspiracy, fraud. He'll never see daylight again. And your organization? I met with the families this morning. Told them I'm stepping down. Turning everything over to a council of younger members who want to go legitimate. Construction, real estate, restaurants, all legal. They weren't happy, but they understood. Nobody wants the attention that comes with being the next target. Rose closed her eyes. You really did it. You actually gave it all up. It was never really mine to begin with. I was just holding on to it because I didn't know what else to be. Nico paused. The kids asked about you. When are you coming back?
Soon.
I need to handle things here first. Will there be charges? Against you? I don't know yet. Webb appeared beside her, arms crossed. We need to talk.
Now.
Rose hung up, faced her commanding officer. His expression was unreadable. 3 cities, Webb said quietly. 3 perfect operations. Intelligence we've been trying to gather for 5 years, and you delivered it in 2 weeks. He leaned closer.
How?
I made a deal, Rose said. With Nico Falcone. The silence was deafening. You made a deal. With a mob boss. While working undercover, Webb's voice was dangerously calm. Do you understand what you've done? I understand that 3 homicide cases just got solved. I understand that the Corsini organization, which has killed dozens of people, just got dismantled. I understand that we just seized 70 kilos of heroin that won't destroy families. And I understand, Rose met his eyes, that 2 paralyzed children are learning to walk again because someone decided they mattered more than protocol. Those children's father is a criminal. Was a criminal. He's cooperating fully. He's given up his entire operation. He's going legitimate. And in exchange, he gets immunity for nonviolent crimes and custody of his kids. Rose pulled out a folder, handed it to Webb. It's all here. The deal I negotiated. Everything documented. Everything legal. Webb opened the folder, scanned the contents. His expression shifted from anger to confusion to reluctant understanding. You went over my head, he said finally, directly to the U.S. attorney. I did what was necessary to protect innocent children and catch dangerous criminals. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to follow orders, even when those orders would get kids killed.
Rose challenged.
If you'd raided that mansion like you planned, the Corsinis would have struck during the chaos. Marco and Lucia would be dead. Maybe Falcone too. Maybe me. And we'd have arrested one mobster while letting an entire crime family walk free. Webb stared at the folder for a long moment. Finally, he looked up. The U.S. attorney signed off on this?
Yes.
Falcone's testimony and evidence are worth more than his prosecution. Especially since he's willing to leave the life completely. And you believe him? That he'll actually go straight? Rose thought about Nico sitting with his children. About the way he'd looked at them after they'd been attacked. About a man who'd given up 20 years of power for the chance to be a real father. Yes, she said.
Idag.
Webb closed the folder, handed it back. Then I guess we have a deal. But Rose. His voice hardened. You're done with undercover work.
Permanently.
What you did, lying to me, negotiating behind my back, making deals with criminals, that's not how we operate. I know.
You'll be reassigned.
Probably desk duty, for a year, while Internal Affairs investigates. Your career as a detective is effectively over. Rose had expected this. Accepted it. I understand.
Do you?
Because you just threw away everything you worked for. No, Rose said quietly. I saved it. I became a cop to protect people. That's what I did. If the department can't see that, then maybe I don't belong here anyway. Webb studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. Get out of here, Marlon. Go back to those kids. Finish what you started. But when you're done playing nurse, you report back here for reassignment. Clear? Clear. Rose left the command center, walked to her car, and drove toward the mansion. Her phone buzzed continuously, messages from Chun, from other task force members, from people wanting to know how she'd pulled off the impossible. She ignored them all. Because 60 miles away, 2 children were learning to walk, and their father was learning to be present, and a broken family was slowly being stitched back together by a cop who'd forgotten how to choose duty over decency. Rose had lost her career, her reputation, probably years of advancement opportunities. But as she pulled up to the mansion and saw Marco and Lucia waiting by the window, standing now, using their braces, waving at her with huge smiles, she realized she'd gained something far more valuable. She'd gained a family that wasn't hers, but somehow was. And for the first time in months, Rose Marlin felt like she was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later. The park was perfect, one of those crisp autumn mornings where the air smelled like fallen leaves and possibility. Rose sat on a bench, coffee in hand, watching 2 children race across the grass. Not walking, not limping, running. Marco reached the oak tree first, slapping his hand against the trunk. I win. No fair. Lucia protested, breathless and laughing. You got a head start. Did not. Did too. Rose smiled, sipping her coffee. 6 months ago, those children had been confined to wheelchairs, written off by specialists, paralyzed by violence they didn't understand. Now they were arguing about foot races like normal 7-year-olds. It had taken work. Months of physical therapy, of exercises that made them cry, of setbacks and small victories. Marco had walked first. Those initial 3 steps had turned into 10, then 50, then hundreds. Lucia had been slower, her nerve damage more extensive, but she'd refused to give up. 2 weeks ago, she'd stood from her wheelchair without assistance and said, I'm done sitting. Now they ran. Not perfectly. Marco's left leg still dragged slightly when he got tired, and Lucia needed ankle braces for stability, but they ran. They played. They were children again. Careful near the pond, called a voice from across the park. Nico Falcon walked toward them, carrying a small bag and wearing jeans.
Actual jeans.
Rose still wasn't used to seeing him in casual clothes, without the expensive suits and armed guards. He looked younger somehow, less haunted. They're going to tire themselves out before lunch, he said, sitting beside Rose. That's the plan. Exhausted kids are happy kids. And easier to get to sleep tonight. That too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Marco and Lucia explore the park. A year ago, this moment would have been impossible. A mafia boss and an undercover cop, sitting on a park bench, co-parenting 2 children who'd been caught in a war neither of them chose. But that was a different life. I got the official papers yesterday, Nico said quietly. The U.S. attorney closed the case. Full immunity as promised. As long as I stay clean, stay away from the families, and keep cooperating with any ongoing investigations. How does it feel? Strange. Like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, he paused. But also,
free.
I don't check for tails anymore. Don't sleep with a gun under my pillow. Don't wake up wondering who's planning to kill me. It's unsettling how unsettling peace is. Rose understood. She'd felt the same way after leaving the police force. The official story was resigned to pursue private practice. Webb had been kind enough not to destroy her publicly, even though they both knew the truth. She'd lost her badge, her career trajectory, everything she'd worked for. But she'd gained something else. "How's the clinic?"
Nico asked.
"Busy. Word spreads fast when you help kids walk again." Rose had opened a pediatric therapy clinic 3 months ago, funded partially by Nico's legitimate businesses. He'd insisted, saying he owed her more than money could repay. "I have 6 patients now. 2 with spinal injuries, 3 with cerebral palsy, 1 recovering from a car accident. All of them making progress. Because you don't give up on them. Because I learned from 2 very stubborn children that impossible is just a word doctors use when they stop trying." Marco ran back to them, face flushed. "Can we have the soccer ball now? Please." Nico pulled it from the bag. "Defense this time. I'm tired of losing." "You're supposed to let us win," Lucia said, arriving beside her brother. "That's what dads do." "Where did you hear that?" "Rose told us." Nico shot Rose a look. She smiled innocently. "I may have mentioned that good fathers sometimes adjust their game strategy to build their children's confidence. You're teaching them to exploit my parental guilt. I prefer to think of it as therapeutic relationship building." Nico laughed, a real laugh, unguarded and genuine, and headed onto the grass with the twins. Rose watched them play, marveling at how much had changed. Vito was serving 30 years in federal prison. The Corsini family had been dismantled, its leadership scattered or incarcerated. The drug shipments that once flowed through Philadelphia had dried up, at least from that particular source. And Nico Falcone, once one of the most feared men in the city, was playing soccer with his children in a public park, completely unprotected, completely at peace. "Rose," Lucia called. "Come play." "I'm the referee," Rose called back. "Someone has to keep score." "You're just afraid we'll beat you too." Rose stood, setting down her coffee. "Oh, you did not just challenge me." She kicked off her shoes and jogged onto the grass. The twins squealed with delight, and for the next 20 minutes, they played. Badly, joyfully, with the kind of chaotic enthusiasm that only children possess. When Marco scored a goal between 2 jackets they'd placed as goalposts, he jumped, actually jumped, with his arms raised. Lucia hugged him, and Nico swept them both up, spinning them around until they screamed with laughter. Rose stood back, watching the scene, her heart full. This wasn't the ending she'd planned. It wasn't what the police department wanted, or what the prosecutors expected, or what anyone would write in a case file as success. But 2 children were running. A father was present. A family that had been broken by violence was being rebuilt by choice, by effort, by love. Sometimes justice looked like handcuffs and prison sentences. Sometimes it looked like a little girl laughing as her father spun her around in a park. Rose had spent 6 years as a cop believing she knew the difference between right and wrong, legal and illegal, duty and betrayal. Then she'd met 2 paralyzed children and realized that sometimes the most moral choice was the one that broke all the rules. "Rose," Marco called, holding the ball. "One more game?" "One more," she agreed. As the sun climbed higher and the autumn air filled with children's laughter, Rose Marlin, former detective, current therapist, permanent guardian angel to 2 miraculous kids, realized something profound. She'd been sent into the Falcone mansion to destroy a criminal empire. Instead, she'd saved a family, not from the law, but from themselves, from grief and guilt and the violence that had defined them. And in saving them, she'd somehow saved herself. The official story would never be told. The task force would take credit for the Corsini takedown, Nico would remain a footnote in closed case files, and Rose would be remembered, if at all, as the detective who'd resigned under mysterious circumstances. But here, in this park, with these children running on legs that everyone said would never work, the truth was written in every step, every laugh, every moment of impossible joy. Some victories couldn't be measured in arrests or convictions. Some victories looked like a 7-year-old girl racing her brother to an oak tree. Some victories were just a family, broken and rebuilt, learning to live without fear. And as Marco scored another goal and Lucia protested loudly about the fairness of it all, as Nico laughed with the kind of freedom he'd never known in his old life, Rose understood that this ordinary, beautiful, chaotic moment was worth more than any badge she'd ever worn. This was what she'd become a cop to protect. Not the law, not the system, not order. This.
Life. Hope. Seconde chance.
Rose, Nico said, walking over while the twins continued playing. Thank you. For everything. For not giving up. For making a deal with the devil. You're not the devil, Rose said. You were just lost. We all were. And now. Rose looked at Marco and Lucia, at two children who'd been given up on, who'd beaten impossible odds, who were living proof that redemption was possible for everyone. Now we're found, she said simply. Nico smiled, and together they watched the twins play until the sun began to set, and it was time to go home. Not to a fortress, not to a prison, just home, where a family, imperfect, unconventional, stitched together by a cop who'd forgotten how to follow orders, was learning what it meant to truly live. And somewhere in Philadelphia, a police file marked Falco Nico, case closed, gathered dust in an archive, its pages never revealing the real story. The story of two paralyzed children who learned to run. The story of a mafia boss who learned to be a father. The story of a detective who learned that sometimes saving people meant breaking every rule she'd ever believed in. Their story wasn't one of mafia legend. It was something better. It was a story of hope. The end.